Chapter 6. Outside the operation theatre, waiting for the doctor was nerve-wracking. Ahmet was deeply in guilt, as it was his mistake to leave Paul alone in the forest. He was thwarted by Mehmet's men. It was a complete trap for Ahmet, and he was stuck in it. The murders, forensic report, and dealer's escape all led them to the trap. In the forest, gunmen encircled them when they were far from their team. They tried their best to get rid of them, but only Paul succeeded after shooting 3 men. But it was all planned. Everything was as clear to Ahmet as a mirror. It was a complete meeting in which Mehmet impelled him to relinquish the case and live a happy life with his family, but failed to convince Ahmet. The things that made Ahmet stunned were Mehmet's ocean blue eyes, making him think of his wife and son in that dangerous situation, and the order of Mehmet to leave him alive. He was still perplexed in the hospital, looking at his wife's eyes that had a sense of foreboding. He stood from his place when the doctor brought a baby in a pink blanket out from the theatre. Nihar carefully held her in her arms. She looked up, her eyes wide with both hope and dread. The silence stretched for hours before he gently placed the baby in her arms. For a moment, the warmth of new life brought a flicker of joy, but it was quickly overshadowed by the expression on the doctor's face. He took a deep breath, as if trying to find the right words, but they came out heavy and broken. We did everything we could, but we lost her mother. I'm so sorry. Her heart sank, and suddenly the weight of the baby became heavier for her. She looked at the baby, so fragile, so innocent, so beautiful. If you need anything, we're here, he whispered, before quietly leaving the room. Her tears finally spilt over, mixing with the quiet breaths of the life she now held, a heartbreaking reminder of what had been lost. Ahmet was immobilized, stupefied at his place. Voices drifted around him. Someone was speaking, but it was like listening through water, distant, muffled, meaningless. His body felt heavy, as though it no longer belonged to him, anchored in place while his mind tried to grasp the enormity of what he'd just heard. Ahmet, are you listening to me? She lost both her father and mother. Nihar's trembling voice hit him. He came to his senses and looked at the baby. He wanted to hold her, but the nurse interrupted and took the baby from them. She needs to be in the nursery. You can meet her after half an hour after checkup. Nihar, don't you think it's all my mistake? If I didn't ask him to come with me, he would be alive. Ahmet was in great regret. Don't, Ahmet. We can't undo what has happened. The events are beyond our control now. He clenched his fists as Mehmet was in his fist, and he wanted to squeeze him. He reiterated not to withdraw from his case and moved towards the reception to complete the paperwork. After the funeral, Ahmet went to his study room and Nihar took the baby into her room, arranging some necessary things for the baby with the help of Hazibi. Ahmet was in his study room, sitting on the armchair, his best friend's laughter echoing faintly in his mind, a ghostly reminder of better times. They had been through everything together, the laughter, the fights, and the secrets no one else would ever know. And now his best friend was gone, snatched away by fate's cruel hand. A framed photo caught his eye, his best friend and wife, smiling at their wedding. He could barely breathe as he picked it up, his fingers trembling. He couldn't cry anymore. He was past that. All that was left was a hollowness, an ache so deep it felt like it was pulling him apart from the inside. His eyes, red and swollen, searched the room as if looking for a way to undo the pain, to wake up from this nightmare. But there was nothing. Nihar entered the study room and glanced at him. He was now sleeping. She sat down on the beanbag, looking at him softly. She knew he was in deep guilt. Only time could heal that wound, or maybe the little angle. The day arose with new hopes. Ibrahim was chuckling, looking at the baby, and Hazib was carrying and feeding her. Hazibi, she is very cute. Oh, she is a little doll. Can I hold her? Ibrahim's elation was ineffable. No, she is fragile. You cannot carry her. But Hazibi, she is mine. Mine forever. Of course, my heart, she is. Let her take a rest. When will she play with me? What's her name? Will she go to school with me? Flood of questions? I will give you the answers, but it's time for breakfast, hurry. Hazibi, place her in her crib, please. They were having breakfast when Ahmet descended the stairs. It looked like he composed himself bit by bit, like a man rebuilding something fragile yet precious. There would be time to break down later. But right now he needs to be steady to keep moving forward. His eyes refocused, sharp and resolute, as he took that first step back into the world, leaving the chaos behind for now. Dad Ibrahim wanted to run towards him, but Nihar grasped him and said, "Finish your breakfast." She was relaxed after seeing him. He was looking much better from the previous night. Ahmet, what about Elif? Nihar named her what her parents had selected. What about her? Shouldn't she be handed over to her uncle? No. No. He is a drunken man. I cannot hand him Elif. It is the last thing I want to do, he thought. Sorry, Nihar. Can you look after her? I realize I am asking for a lot, but can you? Please. She sat quietly, silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the floor, the weight of the request heavy between them. Finally she looked up, her eyes meeting him, searching for something, perhaps a sign, perhaps reassurance, but his face was unreadable, and there was a softness in his eyes, a quiet plea that touched something deep within her. She nodded slowly. I'll do it. Suddenly the room felt lighter. He blinked, relief flashing across his face, though he didn't say a word. She could feel his gratitude in the way he exhaled, his shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. Elif became a part of their family. Nihar handled everything smoothly. Nihar was the best choice as a life partner, Ahmet often thought. Time flew and Elif turned 5 while Ibrahim was 10 years old. No doubt Hazi played a significant role in their lives. Ahmet still had a confusion about Mehmet, though he was still working on. Sometimes his eyes made him frustrated. He wanted to share his confusion with Nihar but held it. He followed every clue that led him towards Mehmet. He had the information that Mehmet had died. The new one who called himself Mehmet was named after Mehmet. Though he didn't know the cause, he was willing to. Ahmet was out for a case. Ibrahim was in the study room working on his school project. Nihar and Hazibi were in the garden, and Elif was running around them when Nihar received a call. She hurriedly left her chair and went inside, opened the door, and beckoned the guest. They entered the drawing room and Nihar quickly closed the door. Ibrahim glanced from the study room's window, a suited man, in his 50s, with a beautiful smile on his face. He was thinking about going down and meeting him. He liked him. Nihar was crying, trembling, and her deep ocean blue eyes made her blind. Abi, why are you here? It's very risky. I know, my little bird, I know Ahmet is not in the city. I want to see you last time. Last time. Yes, I am winding up all my activities here, moving to England. Abi, leave all this. Surrender. Nihar, trembling, pleading, made Eza regret what he had done to his life. Nihar, leave this topic. It's useless. I don't have much time. Can you call your son Ibrahim? Let me see him. Nihar smiled softly, of course. Why not? She went upstairs to call Ibrahim. As soon as she left, his phone rang. Sir, Ahmet is here. How? Isn't he arriving tomorrow? His low voice was dangerously cold and calm. I want Emir at my pace right now. He'll pay for this, he muttered, his voice like a growl, the anger settling into something darker, more dangerous. He rapidly left the room. He wanted to get out before Ahmet entered, but he was late. Their eyes met. His eyes widened in surprise, while the other's gaze was cold, unflinching. Ahmet couldn't respond for a moment. His mind raced, a flood of thoughts crashing through his head, trying to piece together what this meant. Why was he here? Mehmet took slow steps forward. He clenched his fists, fighting to stay calm. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out every other sound. The hallway, the exit, the freedom he had sought just moments ago, all felt so far away now. There was no escape. Ahmet took out his gun, aiming at Mehmet. Nihar, Ibrahim, he called out their names at the top of his lungs to make sure they were fine. Nihar frighteningly heard his voice and asked Ibrahim to stay inside and ran outside. Mehmet laughed sarcastically. "We need to talk," but Ahmet shot him. He tried to dodge his bullet but failed, and the bullet tore through him, a sharp, searing pain exploding in his shoulder. He narrowed his eyes in fury. Without thinking, he pulled the trigger, aiming to end it. But in the split second between the shot and the impact, she moved. "No," he screamed, but it was too late. Nihar stepped forward, her body a blur of motion as the bullet struck her. Her gasp filled the air, sharp and pained. Time slowed as her eyes widened in shock, her hand instinctively reaching toward the wound blossoming across her chest. Ahmet watched in horror as she crumpled, collapsing into his arms, her weight pulling him down with her. His heart pounded in his chest, but his world had already shattered. "No, no," he whispered, his voice trembling in disbelief. His grip on the gun loosened. "She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to fall," he mumbled. His hands shook, and his stomach churned, regret hitting him like a tidal wave. The guilt, the horror, it all came rushing in, suffocating him as he stood there, paralyzed by the sight of her lifeless body. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible as the reality of his action tore him apart.